Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
Hi there, I'm Julie Musgrave, guest host of Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we talk with CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs of companies and organizations like YPO, EO, Activision Blizzard, LendingTree, OpenTable, Act Software, and many more. Our guest today is Derek Harp, a serial tech and cybersecurity entrepreneur. He's got a passion for helping others make a difference through new ideas and new companies. He has 20 plus years of experience in the cybersecurity field, and he's on a mission to, quite frankly, just change the world. What better time to adopt that way of thinking, right? We are so looking forward to hearing from him. But first, I've got to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Rise 25 Media. Rise 25 helps B2B businesses get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. If you're listening to this and have ever thought, should I do a podcast? Well, we say yes. We specialize in helping B2B businesses with a high client lifetime value. So to learn more and get some more inspiration and ideas about how you could get clients, referrals, and some of the best friendships of your life from a podcast, go to rise25media.com or email support@rise25media.com. As I mentioned, our guest is Derek Harp. After serving in the U.S. Navy, he founded his first cybersecurity company in 1997, which turned out a product called IntelliShield that eventually was acquired by Cisco Systems. Not bad for your first go, right? He's gone on to found several cybersecurity companies since then, and in the process has earned the respect of industry leaders through his professional speaking gigs, talking to Fortune 500 companies, military leaders, universities, and conferences across the globe. Right now, he's the CEO and founder of Sable Cyber LLC, a cybersecurity holding company helping business leaders connect to the right services for their company. He's also the chairman and founder of a not-for-profit peer-to-peer networking cybersecurity organization. Derek, thank you so much for being here with us today. We certainly appreciate it. Really looking forward to diving into your expertise. It's really interesting and something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs maybe aren't considering right at the forefront when they're trying to get their business going. So I want to start with something timely. The biggest concern, what is the one that you're seeing right now, especially because of this pandemic? We've got a lot more folks working remotely. The online usage is increasing. What are you dealing with right now?
You know, this era ushers in so many different issues for cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is already, a problem area. It's grown exponentially in the last 20 years since I started in the industry. 1997, just for frame of reference, was $1 billion industry. And now it's over $100 billion a year. So that's what it's done in just a little over 20 years. And so now what we have with a problem, with an already pre-existing problem, we've what we would call added so many new attack surfaces, all these remote workers, all these new connections, and new behaviors. People doing things from their house that they used to do from work and trying to enable all that and rapidly enable. So there's tons of things going on that you don't want to have go on in enterprises. But of course, we have to move forward. I'm a pragmatist. I actually don't speak from, when I speak on this topic, I don't speak from a technical basis. I speak about human behavior and low-hanging fruit and let's mitigate these risks. I don't talk about buying exotic new technologies. I've had companies where I was the founder or co-founder of specific technologies. And right now I'm not doing that. I'm really doing broad-based. Let's attack some of this stuff that applies to all of us. And right now that's everywhere.
And we're all kind of having to shift our way of thinking and learn new things. It's just a really interesting time. I can tell you've got a passion for cybersecurity. So why is that aspect of a business so important?
It's crucial to every, I like it, or I usually describe any organization. We think in terms of businesses, but I'm involved in various not-for-profit efforts. And so any human beings getting together to do anything are vulnerable. And then even our family home networks and our home unit, our family unit, which isn't a business at all, it's not even an entity, legally, is vulnerable. So I do think in terms of this as a societal issue, not purely a business issue, even though business targets are juicy. And obviously the more juicy the target, the more likely you are to, that you're going to get attacked. But it used to be also that was really true too. And so if you were small or obscure or nobody knows about me, your chances were a lot less. And that's just not true anymore. Now there's automated tools to discover you. They don't have to be looking for you. They discover you and discover that there's openings and things to exploit. So I'm passionate about it in that I started, I suppose that's twofold. I'm passionate about it because it's a big problem and we haven't solved it, no matter how much money we spend. And the other one is I probably lucked into it. I was coming out of the military and could have gone a lot of different directions. I was determined to start a business. I had an early entrepreneurship dream and exposure as a young person. But I had started, at least on paper, a different business, a very different business. And ran into a former college mate who was also in the Navy and graduated the same program. And he's the one who said, hey, what about cybersecurity? Now, I was exposed to security-related things in the military, but I wasn't thinking of applying that in my afterlife, if you will, after the military. And he's the one who said, hey, we should take a look at this. And that, in 1997, just took me down this road. And it's a growth industry, of course. There's no end in sight and things we need to do and goals we have to accomplish.
I really feel like you got into this field at the right time. I mean, 1997, things were exploding. We were just trying to figure it out. Nobody really understood how the internet worked, how any of this worked. How have you seen the needs change over the years?
Well, you're right. I mean, 97, you look at the 90s, we were jamming all these cables together going, oh, look at that. I mean, in a way,
the dial-up, the phone number, you had to have the separate deal.
America Online DVDs or CDs.
Yes, 100 free minutes or whatever.
It was an exciting time. We were all getting online and getting connected. And this thing that was the purview of defense and universities suddenly became a playground for everybody. And who knew? Nobody could say they knew it was going to turn into all this. In fact, it really wasn't designed for all this, which has a lot of things today. That the security issue is partly as big as it is because of that. The architecture wasn't secure. It had other goals. So I think it's true that those were the heydays of plugging networks together and finding, oh, we can do this with this, we can do that with this. Now we're adding so many things. I've seen statistics that we're adding, the Internet of Things being a very popular term for smart connected devices of so many different types. So we're adding 5 million of those a day. This was a couple of years ago statistic. 5 million of those a day, being taken out of their box and plugged in and connecting, to other devices to the tune of 50 billion or more, in the next few years. So that's a lot of new applications. So when we talk about the cybersecurity problem, I suppose one of my excitements is we're not trying to solve like the moon landing, which was a static problem. Just work on it, spend millions, they give a presidential speech, and they got it. The goal didn't keep changing. Here, it's like, let's solve a big problem. Oh, by the way, the target's going to change shape, size, and color, every 5 minutes. But let's solve it. And that's an interesting opportunity and a challenge, for sure.
That sounds, quite frankly, kind of exhausting, especially as a business owner, because a lot of folks, we don't really understand that is happening, that are these people that are trying to get into our information, it's shifting, it's changing, it's complicated, it's overwhelming. So what sort of advice would you have for folks to kind of ease them into understanding this, knowing how the importance of it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's an important question because prioritization is everything. What I just described, and most of my peers and a lot of my close friends are business owners in the small, medium, size market. Some notable size businesses, but not necessarily the Fortune 500 companies, which are spending, money and have staffs. When you go into the SMB market segment, which is, of course, where there's more entities than ever, it's the problem. Like, what do I do? And I've only got this many resources. Maybe I have people that know a little bit about this. Maybe I don't, depending on the size of the company. Depending on what sector. If they're a credit card processing company that might be actually only have 100 employees, they're going to be cyber savvy probably. But if you're a manufacturer with all sorts of networks on your manufacturing line, you could have no cybersecurity savviness, in that sector. And so it's it's a huge, winter wonderland of different levels of maturity. And so I always, when I speak on this, and my favorite audience to speak to, which I speak to regularly, is non-technical business leaders. So I don't talk to technical people and get into the ones and zeros and bits and bytes. I don't. I love talking to non-technical business leaders. And what do we focus on? Human behaviors. And because there are going to be other people that will recommend buy this technology, put it in your network here. I'll leave that to them. What I'm focused on, and what some of my startups in my Sable and Cyber kind of holding company are focused on, and the book that I'd like to finish, although I'm trying to get difficult to write a book, is on human behaviors. The things we've got to stop doing. The example being, phishing is so wildly successful. Receiving a communication, now that does not necessarily have to be an email, although that's the typical delivery method. It could be a text, smishing, or SMS phishing, as they're now calling it. Getting a payload and interacting with it. And our suspicion is low, and our desire to just interact and do is high. It's extremely vulnerable, and all the statistics support that so many different attacks start with a human being on the inside of your company, including you, CEOs on down, opening and clicking and interacting on things that they should have been suspicious with. And I test this all the time with companies and with audiences, and every simulation and every test, it always comes out the same. A high percentage of people that interact with things they shouldn't do.
I know those things can be so sneaky because you mentioned they send you a text message and they disguise it as your AT&T account has been compromised, or click on this and it's something that you had just been looking at online, or you think that it's coming from a reliable source. So I can only imagine the people that feel like a fool when they fall for it, but they make it really hard for you to distinguish. Do you have any advice for knowing?
Yeah, we could spend more time on just this. We could spend a whole session on this.
Yeah.
But you're right to ask it, Julie. It's the thing that the real truth is obvious ones we're getting through too. So yes, there can be exotic, calculated. Let's say it's a foreign nation state sponsored thing, and you're for some reason being targeted. Very unlikely. But it sounds fun. It's certainly the stuff in Hollywood. But nation states are very sophisticated, and for some reason you're at a company where they did want to target you. Their likelihood of getting into your network is very, very high. In fact, if they're determined, it's going to probably happen. But what's happening for most people is not exotic stuff, and it's not obvious. And so when I do phishing simulations, I put tells all throughout it, which is partly what I feature when I train people and when I do lectures and when I speak on this. I go, let's break this down. Clue here, clue here, clue here, clue here, misspellings, no salutation, not from anybody. A domain name, if you Google the domain name, I've registered the domain name 3 days ago. That page is incomplete. It says it's incomplete. None of this. I'll hover over the link. Ugly hashtag numbers, dollar signs, characters. Put the word Google's in there. Oh, come on. No, don't interact with that link whatsoever. Just because the word Google's there, maybe at the beginning, and a bunch of stuff. No. You look at that link and say, no, that's a horrible link. I'm not touching it. I'm not getting involved with it. Those should all be warning signs. And so yeah, let's put aside the exotic ones that are very tricky, and just say, what about cutting out 80% of the stuff and get your people all on board and say, just be suspicious. Sorry. And if you're not sure, I start a new email and I email the originator. I say, dear Jenny, did you mean to do this? Dear Bill, did you send me this? Is this legitimate? And so they say, well, that could be intercepted. Well, yes, but as soon as you start doing secondary communication, you're narrowing down. And yes, it was determined, and they're monitoring email and they're communicating. It's possible you can answer back. But I sometimes, if I really don't know, I say, you know what? Let's take this outside of email and have a discussion. Verify, and a lot of the bad actors fall off as soon as you start to verify.
I think that's a really good keyword to keep in mind. You brought up a really good point earlier, just about how it's not. They can find really anyone. A lot of people might have the mentality, oh, I'm a small business in Timbuktu. No one's going to know who I am. You think maybe only Amazon gets hit, Apple, big companies. But no, they're finding even the tiny ones, right?
Absolutely. It's, when I started in the mid-90s, it's true the headlines and the incidents were dominated by big banks. and things you would recognize and say, oh yeah, that makes sense. I can see them going after them. That's just not the case today. We used to joke and call people thought they had security through obscurity, and you don't. And they don't need to be looking for you. They don't need to ever have heard of you. They can run all sorts of tools. They are running all sorts of tools, scanning the world, looking for, and they can run it for hours and hours or days and come back and say, oh, look, my automated system is telling me here are 18 really interesting systems I should investigate and take a little closer human-based look at. That's how they're doing that. So they don't need to know you and know about you, but they do discover. And you can say, well, yeah, but what would they want to have to do with me? That also, I hope, is no longer a question for a business owner. They go, well, I do get that ransomware. If there's any business owner that's never heard of ransomware, they really got, they need to do some reading. That's very common. Billions of dollars in ransoms being paid. So what happens? I'm an unknown company. I'm small. I don't have any really deep intellectual property. I don't store any credit card information. No, I'm not a risk. No. You are a risk to, hey, by the way, we've locked up all of your data, or we've locked up all your operations, your manufacturing operations, and until you pay us a sum that, by the way, you can pay, will be appropriate in our ransom. It might only be $10,000. We know you're not going to pay $1 million ransom, but we will get the $7,000 fee out of you in Bitcoin or some sort of cryptocurrency, and then we'll let you, in most cases, we'll give you a key and we'll let you get your data back or let you resume operation. Those are being paid all the time.
That's scary just on its own. So hopefully this will alert folks and just want to, make sure everything is lined up. I kind of want to switch gears a little bit and just talk about, because you've been through the startup process so many times, you really understand the power of networking. So how would you say that plays into each venture that you go into?
Hugely. I'm writing another book. This one I'm writing. I'm contributing to a Dropbox folder that a few people have access to. I'm contributing pieces and parts to it. It's not a book like I'm coming out with next week, but I've been developing a system actually for how I do that, because I've always been a networker. I've always been wanting to meet people, connect to people. I've spoken on many stages and platforms and incubators, accelerators, university groups. I always talk about this. Because I basically look, my system I'm calling RelDel 360, relationship development, and it's like, it's all around you. People are like, oh, I need to build some relationship with some investors if I'm going to raise money. Oh, that's true. Oh, I need to build some relationship with some people that I might recruit as employees. Well, that's true. Oh, advisors, employees, customers, investors. Oh, these are all people. These are all relationships. So I think for me, I lucked out in that I like people and I like meeting people, and I don't look 1,000 yards past somebody as some jerks do. Like if you're going to do anything for me, I'll make a quick judgment call. I'm always interested in people. Now, I sometimes have to make a decision, but I give someone my full attention. I try 98% of the time. I think I do for at least for a minute or two. Because I don't know where that relationship's going to go. And so that's my in-person ethic, which is give someone your full attention, even if I have to say, I'm sorry, I got to break this off. But give people your attention, whoever they are. If I'm sitting on a bus and somebody addresses me, because I'm highly distracted, I'm going to do that right there as well. And I've always done that. And I've met people in so many different capacities that way. The system is about maintaining, those are those first touches. Some of them are by accident, serendipity. Some of them are on purpose, when you try to meet someone, either virtually or in person. Well, then what do you do with that? How do you nurture that relationship? And I've always said you got to invest in those things. You got to layer those on and give. There's The Secret, the book out, that's been out forever.
Put it out there.
Based on principles that are true, right? You got to keep giving. People think, oh, that sounds magical. I'm like, well, if you give, if you're constantly giving, yes, the universe could recognize that. I kind of believe in that. But the other thing is, it just creates luck and serendipity are more likely to happen because you're out and you're doing and you're giving and you're talking to people. And giving could be of your time, and I try. I get requests for advice and mentorship. I've certainly received a lot of that. I try to give it as well. I don't always get to everybody, but I really do try.
There's potential really in every relationship that you encounter. So it's a good way of thinking that, hey, this could turn into something really, really beautiful. What relationships do you find yourself relying on most when founding a new business and helping others do so?
You've got your key service providers. I think early on, there's going to be some finance and accounting and legal stuff that's always the truth. You're always, maintaining and adding to those relationship categories. They're kind of instrumental. You're going to do some stuff early on, no matter what the venture is. I've often raised money for some of my ventures, or most of my ventures, and so I'm always interested in staying in contact with and developing relationships with people who are interested in investing in early stage ventures. That's a particular cut. That's not everybody's cup of tea. And so when I meet somebody who's like, yeah, no, I enjoy that. I try to keep track of that relationship, and that's part of the system too. You got to keep track of these things, and and stay up with them, because you don't know. I mean, I also again don't have I've met you, and there must be a transaction we can do in the next 24 hours mentality, which people do. You can tell. I met you. I followed up and asked you whether you invest in my company. First-time entrepreneurs do this all the time. I'm like, okay, probably ought to start developing relationships with people, because that usually is going to be a no. Whereas if you start a relationship and then at some future date they're maybe interested in investing in something that you're doing, but that's not based on the cold call or we just meant something to ask you kind of mentality. So I think you meet people and you try to keep track of many relationships as you can. You might have to make some prioritization decisions, sure. And those blossom or bear fruit sometimes when you least expect it.
It sounds like just trying to remember to be genuine in every aspect of your day-to-day life.
I always say, for me, I think that's essential. You and I both know there's people out there that's deep down, that's not who they are. So I guess they could try to fake it, or they'll have a different method for how they move through life. And there's maybe aggressive, type A, don't really care about other people. And some of them have been quite successful. That's just not me and not my mentality. And I think, so for those I speak to that say, if that's not you either, then yeah, be genuine. And sometimes it takes longer for my process to bear fruit. But then if you're always doing it, it's always bearing fruit, because you build a pipeline. The process means you're always meeting people for the first time. You're always following up with people. You're always, involving people in not necessarily always business things. Other hobbies act as, things that you share in common, affinities. You find those and you connect on those levels. And so if you're doing that all the time, there's always fruit dropping from those trees, even though it's not the person you met yesterday in most cases. Occasionally it is, but you're not looking for lightning in a bottle if that's your way, so to speak.
Well, let's focus on a big takeaway. Are there any best practices in your field that we can start implementing now, making our time working from home, kind of maneuvering this pandemic? How do we get started? What's your best take?
Well, if you're talking specifically cybersecurity, again, train your people. I do trainings for companies, but there are other reputable companies that do a variety of types of trainings and simulations. And I think it's key. Find somebody that you trust, that knows what they're doing, and make sure that your team is brought up to speed. And that's everybody. CEOs or senior executives who take themselves out of this and say, this is for the employees, are fooling themselves, because many of the transgressors are senior people. In fact, they're the people that typically have access or decision-making ability to send wires. So it should be all hands on deck. Everybody needs to get trained every year. I would suggest, and one of my new startups is based on very regular, smaller doses, but very regular versus an annual training. I think that is not highly effective. We still do them, and they're better than nothing. But people awareness is everything. People need to bring that up, because we'll mitigate. This is arbitrary, but we'll mitigate 60% of all the risk just with that. To get to very, very high levels of risk mitigation, you have to spend more money and do things, and there's all sorts of companies specialize in that. But man, there's low-hanging fruit you can do. You can do with just getting everybody to move in a new cultural direction, a security culture, mindedness, if you will. Do that.
Yeah.
If nothing else, do that.
Especially knowing this is all here to stay. It's not going to go away anytime soon. I know our listeners can't see you, but you've got a yellow shirt on. And I've got to ask, I know that's a thing for you. What's the story with the yellow shirts?
Yeah, it is. So I started speaking at one point. I have some comics made. I think derekharp.com/yellow shirts where some of the yellow shirt comics are. And so in cybersecurity, in the cybersecurity realm, those practitioners, we know, or we use all the time, the concept of blue team being defenders and red team being attackers. And so there's simulations and trainings, and red team, blue team, and all that stuff. So I started, especially with everything I just shared, and which is similar to what I share on stage and to companies, that the rest of us are on team yellow. 99.9% of our organization are those of us that aren't attackers and aren't defenders. We're just we make up most of the world. We're Team Yellow, and we are the ones making mistakes and doing, having the bad behavior. So it's like if you have a really, really great blue team and cyber defenders, and you're investing in that, they do great things. But Team Yellow is just out there floating around, not trained, not aware, and not raising up their cyber practices. You're not going to be successful no matter what you're spending on the blue team. So I kind of, that's my thing. And so I always speak in a yellow shirt and try to, bring in those comments when I can to say, hey, this is the team we've got to really worry about.
I like it. It's a smart branding move. Derek, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. I really think a lot of entrepreneurs, small business owners, they're just going to learn so much from you and really appreciate it. How can we learn more about you? Where can we find you online? Give us all those details.
Yeah, so I've had my hands in so many different entities, especially over the years. I'm doing a little bit of reorganization to have just 2 domains where everything can be found. It used to be you could just go to these different places. So DerekHarp.com is a great jumping off point to lots of things. That's my, it kind of caters to speaking, but also some of my hobby interests. I'm a scuba instructor. I've been running a summer program on the island of Bonaire for families and business groups in the summer until COVID hit.
That's not a bad spot.
Yeah, it's our favorite place in the world.
Not too shabby.
We're quite sad about this. I think we had about 15 families and 1 8-person business group all scheduled for the summer and all got canceled.
Oh man.
But that's where that stuff comes from. And then SableLion.com, which we're now I'm creating Sable Lion Cyber as kind of this holding company that has a variety of things. I have a very large not-for-profit trade association, but I will be kind of under Sable Lion Cyber. It's a 501c6 called the Control Systems Cybersecurity Association International. So this would be for anybody who's concerned about the cybersecurity as it pertains to control systems. Now that's the obvious stuff like gas and oil and refineries and electric, grid and stuff. But it's also building control systems and medical healthcare systems. Those are different kind of than traditional IT systems. And so what I found some years ago is that that's a whole new emerging area of cybersecurity. So we have 18,000 members now, close to 18,000, 17 something, of that trade association of people trying to secure those kinds of systems. I do a lot with that as well. And so SableLion.com and DerekHarp.com are kind of the 2 ways to find, the personal and business stuff for me.
All right, we're going to check it out, and hopefully a lot of folks want to come hear you speak in person because I think you've got a lot of good words to say, and we want to listen. So, Derek, thank you so much.
People reach out. Yeah.
We appreciate it, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
Revolution.
And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.